So for me, wide receivers versus defensive backs, that's about as close as you can get to a game situation because they're out there in space, just like they are in a game. Who's winning the matchup? Who's pulling down the football? Or is there tight coverage? And then except for zone coverages, they get more exotic, obviously, during the season. That's a pretty fair judgment you can make on who's winning those outside battles.
Yeah, I was absolutely pleased with Clemson's pass defense in this game. That was a weak link on the defense last year. Let's be brutally honest here. And Dabo Sweeney has made no bones about that. It's got to be better this year. He said it multiple times. I thought the coverage was very good for the most part. Some of those freshman defensive backs really flashed. I think Khalil Barnes is going to be really good. I think he's got an opportunity to play a lot this year. Shelton Lewis looked like he could play some this year. Nate Wiggins looks like he's ready to maybe be that shutdown corner that Clemson thinks he can be. And I think Toriano Pride has also taken another step in his development. So I think Clemson's got some guys there at corner. They got a lot of veteran guys at safety. Andrew Makuba looks like he's returned to freshman form, after an injury-riddled season last year. You got Jalen Phillips and R.J. Mickens back there. So a lot of guys on that secondary, and I thought they had their way with the receivers in this game. Not a lot to like from the receivers, but again, you're missing Bo Collins, you're missing Adam Randall, Will Taylor's playing baseball, Troy Stelato's still out. So a lot of bodies not there Saturday at wideout.
So Jason, correct me if I'm wrong here. You get, and the rest of the media here, 1 or 2 times a week at practice for 15 minutes, something in that range.
4 times during the spring we got to go to practice.
Okay. So about once a week, 15 minutes or so, or was that for the entire practice?
No, it was, we got to go 3 times the first week and then 1 time later in the spring. And we get to watch like the first 5-6 periods. So it's about, it may be a half hour.
So then you're taking in obviously what coaches and coordinators and players have to say, and you're trying to put all that together. So you touched on some of the guys in the secondary. Are there particular players that, based on everything that you gathered going into the spring game, that you were feeling had a really good 15 practices, and then all of a sudden, okay, well, this isn't necessarily consistent with what I thought going into it, or flip side, somebody who just basically confirmed everything that you thought going into the spring game and thought, okay, he's either struggling or he's having a really good spring and it's showing in the spring game?
Just absolutely raved about Peter Woods all spring long.
Yeah.
Absolutely raved about him. Coaches, players, everybody. And I think we saw that praise had been warranted Saturday. He looked really good. But a guy that hasn't been talked about a lot that I was equally impressed by is freshman defensive lineman Stephon Green. I thought he was just equally as impressive as Peter Woods was. Looks like he is going to be ready to go day one. And another guy is offensive lineman Harris Sewell. I thought, he held his own against Woods a good bit of the day. He's a guy that I think could be a contributor this year. So those are 3 guys that I was very interested in seeing on Saturday, and all 3 of them lived up to the billing. One guy in particular that I was hoping would be a little bit further along. Not that the coaches have been raving about him or anything this spring, but wide receiver Noble Johnson, because obviously, the Clemson's wide receivers have struggled the past couple of years, and they need an injection of talent in that room. And I think Johnson provides that. Maybe he's not quite as far along as I was thinking he might be at this time. Still think he's got a lot of upside, but maybe he's a guy that needs a year.
Peter Woods had an interaction that was caught on TV on the sideline that was pretty amusing after he blocked the PAT. And basically that, there was 6 or 7 minutes left in the game. It was a tie score. He blocks the PAT, I believe, to keep it a tie score. And it was just a funny interaction, basically. It was almost that type of vibe that I'm this good of an athlete. And he wasn't bragging about anything. It was basically just coach said to block the PAT. And okay, I'll block it. We got to keep this a tie game here. And just kind of like one of those type of athletes that can do practically anything he wants to do.
He was dinged by the recruiting services for those short arms. That was one of the reasons he was dropped from 5-star to 4-star. And make it make sense.
I guess they want him to catch the ball on the kick. All right, we got Jason Priester here, allclemsontigers.com. And then the only other thing that I'm going for here is the typical setup of offensive line, defensive line. We talked last week about how the split was going to be in regards to starters and backups, but that it was going to be ones versus ones, twos versus twos. So to get a pretty good feel probably on the offensive line play versus the D line, how do you think things worked out in the trenches? I know that you said the defense won the day.
Yeah, I think it was kind of hard to get a good gauge on that. You're missing 3 of the 5 starters. Will Putnam was attending a wedding. That's your starting center. Walker Parks has been out all spring. Marcus Tate has been out all spring. Those are your 2 guards. So I think it's hard to get a good gauge on. But I think that defensive line, for years there under Brent Venables, you knew you were going to get a physically imposing defensive effort from Clemson, a dominating defensive front, extremely aggressive, playing with a chip on its shoulder. I didn't think we got that so much in Wes Goodwin's first year. It just seems like it always seemed like there was something missing from the defense last year. Being there live, I thought, maybe some of that chippiness is back. Maybe that chip on the shoulder is back. I thought they played with a little swagger, the defense as a whole, particularly the defensive line. And they were missing some guys too. Didn't have Root, didn't have Peyton Page, didn't have Trey Williams. But that defensive line, it is deep, especially along the interior. I think freshman TJ Parker is going to be able to help at end immediately. He was another guy I was extremely impressed by. But that defense looks like it is ready to be salty once again after maybe, failing to live up that lofty expectations last year.